Good morning and happy Friday, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to build on the lessons from the past few days while adding in some Chung BaGua shoulder circles, as well as some Liang BaGua stepping, mixing in some Shini arm movement, and all kinds of fun stuff. Hope you guys all enjoy it.
200 watt-hours of juice to go 1 kilometer. So using the full 18,000 watt-hours for motion, minus a negligible amount for computer, life support, etc. Gets me 90 kilometers of travel.
Circles.
Now we're talking. I'll never actually get 90 kilometers on a single charge. I'll have hills to deal with and rough terrain, sand, etc. But it's a good ballpark. It tells me that it would take at least 35 days of travel to get to Ares 4. It'll probably be more like 50, but that's plausible at least. At the rover's blazing 25 kilometers per hour top speed, it'll take me 3.5 hours before I run the battery down. I can drive in twilight and save the sunny part of the day for charging. This time of year I get about 13 hours of light. How many solar cells will I have to pilfer from the Habs farm? Thanks to the fine taxpayers of America, I have over 100 square meters of the most expensive solar paneling ever made. It has an astounding 10.2% efficiency, which is good, because Mars doesn't get as much sunlight as Earth. Only 500 to 700 watts per square meter, compared to the 1,400 Earth gets. Long story short, I need to bring 28 square meters of solar cell. That's 14 panels. I can put 2 stacks of 7 on the roof. They'll stick out over the edges, but as long as they're secure, I'm happy. Every day after driving, I'll spread them out, then wait all day. Man, it'll be dull. Well, it's a start. Tomorrow's mission: transfer Rover 1's battery to Rover 2. Log entry: Sol 64. Sometimes things are easy, and sometimes they're not. Getting the battery out of Rover 1 was easy. I removed 2 clamps on the undercarriage and it dropped right out. The cabling was easy to detach too, just a couple of complicated plugs. Attaching it to Rover 2, however, is another story. There's nowhere to put it. The thing is huge. I was barely able to drag it, and that's in Mars gravity. It's just too big. There's no room in the undercarriage for a second one. There's no room on the roof either. That's where the solar cells will go. There's no room inside the cabin, and it wouldn't fit through the airlock anyway. But fear not, I found a solution. For emergencies completely unrelated to this one, NASA provided 6 square meters of extra hab canvas and some really impressive resin. The same kind of resin, in fact, that saved my life on Sol 6, the patch kit I used on the hole in my suit. In the event of a hab breach, everyone would run to the airlocks. Procedure was to let the hab pop, rather than die trying to prevent it. Then we'd suit up and assess the damage. Once we found the breach, we'd seal it with the spare canvas and resin, then reinflate, and we're good as new. The 6 square meters of spare canvas was a convenient 1 by 6 meters. I cut 10 centimeter wide strips, then used them to make a sort of harness. I used the resin and straps to make 2 10-meter circumference loops. Then I put a big patch of canvas on each end. I now had poor man's saddlebags for my rover. This is getting more and more wagon train every day. The resin sets almost instantly, but it gets stronger if you wait an hour, so I did. Then I suited up and headed out to the rover. I dragged the battery to the side of the rover and looped one end of the harness around it. Then I threw the other end over the roof. On the other side, I filled it with rocks. When the 2 weights were roughly equal, I was able to pull the rocks down and bring the battery up. Yay! I unplugged Rover 2's battery and plugged in Rover 1's. Then I went through the airlock to the rover and checked all systems. Everything was A-OK. I drove the rover around a bit to make sure the harness was secure. I found a few largish rocks to drive over, just to shake things up. The harness held. Hell yeah. For a short time I wondered how to splice the second battery's leads into the main power supply. My conclusion was fuck it. There's no need to have a continuous power supply. When battery 1 runs out, I can get out, unplug battery 1, and plug in battery 2. Why not? It's a 10-minute EVA once per day. I'd have to swap batteries again when I'm recharging them, but again, so what? I spent the rest of the day sweeping off the solar cell farm. Soon, I shall be looting it. Log entry: Sol 65. The solar cells were a lot easier to manage than the battery. They're thin, light, and just lying around on the ground. And I had one additional bonus. I was the one who set them up in the first place. Well, okay, it wasn't just me. Vogel and I worked together on it. And boy, did we drill on it. We spent almost an entire week drilling on the solar array alone. Then we drilled more whenever they figured we had spare time. The array was mission critical. If we broke the cells or rendered them useless, the HAB wouldn't be able to make power, and the mission would end.
All right, shake it out.
You might wonder what the rest of the crew was doing while we assembled the array.
Back.
They were setting up the HAB.
Circles.
Remember, everything in my glorious kingdom came here in boxes. We had to set it up on sols 1 and 2. Each solar cell is on a lightweight lattice that holds it at a 14-degree angle. I'll admit I don't know why it's a 14-degree angle. Something about maximizing solar energy. Anyway, removing the cells was simple, and the HAB can spare them. With the reduced load of only supporting 1 human instead of 6, a 14% energy production loss is irrelevant. Then it was time to stack them on the rover. I considered removing the rock sample container. It's nothing more than a large canvas bag attached to the roof, way too small to hold the solar cells. But after some thought, I left it there, figuring it would provide a good cushion. The cells stacked well. They were made to, for transport to Mars, and the 2 stacks sat nicely on the roof. They hung over the left and right edges, but I won't be going through any tunnels, so I don't care. With some more abuse of the emergency HAB material, I made straps and tied the cells down. The rover has external handles near the front and back. They're there to help us load rocks on the roof. They made perfect anchor points for the straps.
Figure 8.
I stood back and admired my work. Hey, I earned it. It wasn't even noon, and I was done. I came back to the HAB, had some lunch, and worked on my crops for the rest of the sol. It's been 39 sols since I planted the potatoes, which is about 40 Earth days, and it was time to reap and resow. They grew even better than I had expected. Mars has no insects, parasites, or blights to deal with, and the HAB maintains perfect growing temperature and moisture at all times. They were small compared to the taters you'd usually eat, but that's fine. All I wanted was enough to support growing new plants. I dug them up, being careful to leave their plants alive. Then I cut them up into small pieces with 1 eye each and reseeded them into new dirt. If they keep growing this well, I'll be able to last a good long time here. After all that physical labor, I deserved a break. I rifled through Johansson's computer today and found an endless supply of digital books. Looks like she's a big fan of Agatha Christie. The Beatles, Christie.
Check out for a moment.
I guess she's an Anglophile or something.
All right, next
I remember liking Hercule
hip,
Poirot TV
external
specials
rotation.
back when I was a kid. I'll start with The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Looks like that's the first one. Log entry. Sol 66. The time has come, ominous musical crescendo, for some missions. NASA gets to name their missions after gods and stuff, so why can't I? Henceforth, rover experimental missions will be serious missions. Get it? Dogs? Well, if you don't, fuck you. Sirius 1 will be tomorrow. The mission. Start with fully charged batteries and solar cells on the roof, drive until I run out of power, and see how far I get. I won't be an idiot. I'm not driving directly away from the HAB. I'll drive a half-kilometer stretch back and forth. I'll be within a short walk of home at all times. Tonight, I'll charge up both batteries so I can be ready for a little test drive tomorrow. I estimate 3.5 hours of driving, so I'll need to bring fresh CO2 filters. And with the heater off, I'll wear 3 layers of clothes. Log entry. Sol 67. Sirius 1 is complete. More accurately, Sirius 1 was aborted after 1 hour. I guess you could call it a failure, but I prefer the term learning experience. Things started out fine. I drove to a nice flat spot a kilometer from the HAB, then started going back and forth over a 500-meter stretch. I quickly realized this would be a crappy test. After a few laps, I had compressed the soil enough to have a solid path. Nice, hard ground, which makes for abnormally high energy efficiency. Nothing like it would be on a long trip. So I shook it up a bit. I drove around randomly, making sure to stay within a kilometer of the HAB. A much more realistic test. After an hour, things started to get cold, and I mean really cold. The rover's always cold when you first get in it. When you haven't disabled the heater, it warms up right away. I expected it to be cold, but Jesus Christ. I was fine for a while. My own body heat plus 3 layers of clothing kept me warm, and the rover's insulation is top-notch. The heat that escaped my body just warmed up the interior. But there's no such thing as perfect insulation. And eventually, the heat left to the great outdoors, while I got colder and colder. Within an hour, I was chattering and numb. Enough was enough. There's no way I could do a long trip like this. Turning the heater on, I drove straight back to the hab. Once I got home, I sulked for a while. All my brilliant plans foiled by thermodynamics. Damn you, entropy! I'm in a bind. The damn heater will eat half my battery power every day. I could turn it down, I guess, be a little cold, but not freezing to death. Even then, I'd still lose at least a quarter. This will require some thought. I have to ask myself, what would Hercule Poirot do? I'll have to put my little gray cells to work on the problem. Log entry. Sol 68. Well, shit. I came up with a solution, but remember when I burned rocket fuel in the hab? This'll be more dangerous. I'm going to use the RTG. The RTG, radioisotope thermoelectric generator, is a big box of plutonium, but not the kind used in nuclear bombs. No. This plutonium is way more dangerous. Plutonium-238 is an incredibly unstable isotope. It's so radioactive that it will get red hot all by itself. As you can imagine, a material that can literally fry an egg with radiation is kind of dangerous. The RTG houses the plutonium, catches the radiation in the form of heat, and turns it into electricity. It's not a reactor. The radiation can't be increased or decreased. It's a purely natural process happening at the atomic level. As long ago as the 1960s, NASA began using RTGs to power unmanned probes. They have lots of advantages over solar power. They're not affected by storms. They work day or night. They're entirely internal, so you don't need delicate solar cells all over your probe. But they never used large RTGs on manned missions until the Ares program. Why not? It should be pretty damned obvious why not. They didn't want to put astronauts next to a glowing hot ball of radioactive death. I'm exaggerating a little. The plutonium is inside a bunch of pellets, each one sealed and insulated to prevent radiation leakage, even if the outer container is breached. So for the Ares program, they took the risk. An Ares mission is all about the MAV. It's the single most important component. It's one of the few systems that can't be replaced or worked around. It's the only component that causes a complete mission scrub if it's not working. Solar cells are great in the short term, and they're good for the long term if you have humans around to clean them. But the MAV sits alone for years, quietly making fuel, then just kind of hangs out until its crew arrives. Even doing nothing, it needs power, so NASA can monitor it remotely and run self-checks. The prospect of scrubbing a mission because a solar cell got dirty was unacceptable. They needed a more reliable source of power, so the MAV comes equipped with an RTG. It has 2.6 kilograms of plutonium-238, which makes almost 1,500 watts of heat. It can turn that into 100 watts of electricity. The MAV runs on that until the crew arrive. 100 watts isn't enough to keep the heater going, but I don't care about the electrical output. I want the heat. A 1,500-watt heater is so warm, I'll have to tear insulation out of the rover to keep it from getting too hot. As soon as the rovers were unstowed and activated, Commander Lewis had the joy of disposing of the RTG. She detached it from the MAV, drove 4 kilometers away, and buried it. However safe it may be, it's still a radioactive core, and NASA didn't want it too close to their astronauts. The mission parameters don't give a specific location to dump the RTG, just at least 4 kilometers away. So I'll have to find it. I have 2 things working for me. First, I was assembling solar panels with Vogel when Commander Lewis drove off, and I saw she headed due south. Also, she planted a 3-meter pole with a bright green flag over where she buried it. Green shows up extremely well against the Martian terrain. It's made to ward us off, in case we get lost on a rover EVA later on. So my plan is, head south 4 kilometers, then search around till I see the green flag. Having rendered rover 1 unusable, I'll have to use my mutant rover for the trip. I can make a useful test mission of it. I'll see how well the battery harness holds up to a real journey, and how well the solar cells do strapped to the roof. I'll call it Sirius 2. Log entry. Sol 69. I'm no stranger to Mars. I've been here a long time. But I've never been out of sight of the hab before today. You wouldn't think that would make a difference, but it does. As I made my way toward the RTG's burial site, it hit me. Mars is a barren wasteland, and I am completely alone here. I already knew that, of course, but there's a difference between knowing it and really experiencing it. All around me there was nothing but dust, rocks, and endless empty desert in all directions. The planet's famous red color is from iron oxide coating everything, so it's not just a desert. It's a desert so old it's literally rusting. The hab is my only hint of civilization, and seeing it disappear made me way more uncomfortable than I like to admit. I put those thoughts behind me by concentrating on what was in front of me. I found the RTG right where it was supposed to be, 4 kilometers due south of the hab. It wasn't hard to find. Commander Lewis had buried it atop a small hill. She probably wanted to make sure everyone could see the flag, and it worked great. Except instead of avoiding it, I beelined to it and dug it up. Not exactly what she was going for. It was a large cylinder with heat sinks all around it. I could feel the warmth it gave off even through my suit's gloves. That's really disconcerting, especially when you know the root cause of the heat is radiation. No point in putting it on the roof. My plan was to have it in the cabin anyway. So I brought it in with me, turned off the heater, then drove back to the hab. In the 10 minutes it took to get home, even with the heater off, the interior of the rover became an uncomfortably hot 37 degrees Celsius. The RTG would definitely be able to keep me warm. The trip also proved that my rigging worked. The solar cells and extra battery stayed beautifully in place while traversing 8 kilometers of random terrain. I declare Sirius 2 to be a successful mission. I spent the rest of the day vandalizing the interior of the rover. The pressure compartment is made of carbon composite. Just inside that is insulation, which is covered by hard plastic. I used a sophisticated method to remove sections of plastic, hammer, then carefully removed the solid foam insulation, hammer again. After tearing out some insulation, I suited up and took the RTG outside. Soon, the rover cooled down again, and I brought it back in. I watched as the temperature rose slowly, nowhere near as fast as it had on my trip back from the burial site. I cautiously removed more insulation, hammer, and checked again. After a few more cycles of this, I had enough insulation torn out that the RTG could barely keep up with it. In fact, it was a losing battle. Over time, heat will slowly leach out. That's fine. I can turn on the heater for short bursts when necessary. I brought the insulation pieces with me back into the hab. Using advanced construction techniques, duct tape, I reassembled some of them into a square. I figure if things ever get really cold, I can tape that to a bare patch in the rover and the RTG will be winning the heat fight. Tomorrow, Sirius 3, which is just Sirius 1 again, but without freezing.
Ball.
Log entry, Sol 70.
Palm belly.
Today I write to you from the rover. I'm halfway through Sirius 3 and things are going well. I set out at first light and drove laps around the hab trying to stay on untouched ground. The first battery lasted just under 2 hours. After a quick EVA to switch the cables, I got back to driving. When all was said and done, I had driven 81 kilometers in 3 hours and 27 minutes. That's very good. Mind you, the land around the hab is really flat, as is all of Acidalia Planitia. I have no idea what my efficiency would be on the nastier land en route to Ares 4. The second battery still had a little juice left, but I can't just run it down all the way before I stop. Remember, I need life support while recharging. The CO2 gets absorbed through a chemical process, but if the fan that pushes it isn't working, I'll choke. The oxygen pump is also kind of important. After my drive, I set up the solar cells. It was hard work. Last time I had Vogel's help. They aren't heavy, but they're awkward. After setting up half of them, I figured out I could drag them rather than carry them, and that sped things up. Now I'm just waiting for the batteries to recharge. I'm bored, so I'm updating the log. I have all the Poirot books in my computer. That'll help. It's going to take 12 hours to recharge after all. What's that, you say? 12 hours is wrong. I said 13 hours earlier. Well, my friend, let me set you straight. The RTG is a generator. It's a paltry amount of power compared to what the rover consumes, but it's not nothing. It's 100 watts. It'll cut an hour off my total recharge time. Why not use it? I wonder what NASA would think about me fucking with the RTG like this. They'd probably hide under their desks and cuddle with their slide rules for comfort.
Forward roll.
Log entry. Sol 71. As predicted, it took 12 hours to charge the batteries to full. I came straight home as soon as they were done. Time to make plans for Sirius 4, and I think it'll be a multi-day field trip. Looks like power and battery recharging are solved. Food's not a problem. There's plenty of space to store things. Water's even easier than food. I need 2 liters per day to be comfortable. When I do my trip to Ares 4 for real, I'll need to bring the oxygenator. But it's big, and I don't want to screw with it right now, so I'll rely on O2 and CO2 filters for Sirius 4. CO2 isn't a problem. I started this grand adventure with 1,500 hours of CO2 filters, plus another 720 for emergency use. All systems use standard filters. Apollo 13 taught us important lessons. Since then, I've used 131 hours of filter on various EVAs. I have 2,089 left. 87 days worth. Plenty. Oxygen's a little trickier. The rover was designed to support 3 people for 2 days, plus some reserve for safety, so its O2 tanks can hold enough to last me 7 days. Not enough. Mars has almost no atmospheric pressure. The inside of the rover has 1 atmosphere, so the oxygen tanks are on the inside. Less pressure differential to deal with. Why does that matter? It means I can bring along other oxygen tanks and equalize them with the rover's tanks without having to do an EVA. So today, I detached one of the HAB's 2 25-liter liquid oxygen tanks and brought it into the rover. According to NASA, a human needs 588 liters of oxygen per day to live. Compressed liquid O2 is about 1,000 times as dense as gaseous O2 in a comfortable atmosphere. Long story short, with the HAB tank, I have enough O2 to last 49 days. That'll be plenty. Sirius 4 will be a 20-day trip. That may seem a bit long, but I have a specific goal in mind. Besides, my trip to Ares 4 will be at least 40 days. This is a good scale model. While I'm away, the HAB can take care of itself, but the potatoes are an issue. I'll saturate the ground with most of the water I have. Then I'll deactivate the atmospheric regulator so it doesn't pull water out of the air. It'll be humid as hell, and water will condense on every surface. That'll keep the potatoes well watered while I'm away. A bigger problem is CO2. The potatoes need to breathe. I know what you're thinking. Mark, old chap, you produce carbon dioxide. It's all part of the majestic circle of nature. The problem is, where will I put it? Sure, I exhale CO2 with every breath, but I don't have any way to store it. I could turn off the oxygenator and atmospheric regulator and just fill the HAB with my breath over time, but CO2 is deadly to me. I need to release a bunch at once and run away. Remember the MAV fuel plant? It collects CO2 from the Martian atmosphere. A 10-liter tank of compressed liquid CO2 vented into the HAB will be enough CO2 to do the trick. That'll take less than a day to create. So that's everything. Once I vent the CO2 into the HAB, I'll turn off the atmospheric regulator and oxygenator, dump a ton of water on the crops, and head out. Sirius 4. A huge step forward in my rover research. And I can start tomorrow. Chapter 8. Hello, and thank you for joining us, Kathy Warner said to the camera. Today on CNN's Mark Watney report, several EVAs over the past few days. What do they mean? What progress has NASA made on a rescue option, and how will this affect the Ares 4 preparations? Joining us today is Dr. Venkat Kapoor, Director of Mars Operations for NASA. Dr. Kapoor, thank you for coming. A pleasure to be here, Kathy, Venkat said. Dr. Kapoor, Kathy said, Mark Watney is the most watched man in the solar system, wouldn't you say? Venkat nodded. Certainly the most watched by NASA. We have all 12 of our Martian satellites taking pictures whenever he sights in view. The European Space Agency has both of theirs doing the same. All told, how often do you get these images? Every few minutes. Sometimes there's a gap based on the satellite orbits, but it's enough that we can track all his EVA activities. Tell us about these latest EVAs. Well, Venkit said, it looks like he's preparing Rover 2 for a long trip. On Sol 64, he took the battery from the other rover and attached it with a homemade slate. The next day, he detached 14 solar cells and stacked them on the rover's roof. And then he took a little drive, didn't he? Kathy prompted. Yes, he did. Sort of aimlessly for an hour, then back to the hab. He was probably testing it. Next time we saw him was 2 days later, when he drove 4 kilometers away, then back. Another incremental test, we think. Then, over the past couple of days, he's been stocking it up with supplies. Kathy said. Most analysts think Mark's only hope of rescue is to get to the Ares 4 site. Do you think he's come to the same conclusion? Probably, Venkit said. He doesn't know we're watching. From his point of view, Ares 4 is his only hope. Do you think he's planning to go soon? He seems to be getting ready for a trip. I hope not, Venkit said. There's nothing at the site other than the MAV. None of the other pre-supplies. It would be a very long, very dangerous trip, and he'd be leaving the safety of the hab behind. Why would he risk it? Communication, Venkit said. Once he reaches the MAV, he could contact us. So that would be a good thing, wouldn't it? Communication would be a great thing, but traversing 3,200 kilometers to Ares 4 is incredibly dangerous. We'd rather he stayed put. If we could talk to him, we'd certainly tell him that. He can't stay put forever, right? Eventually he'll need to get to the MAV. Not necessarily, Venkit said. JPL is experimenting with modifications to the MDV so it can make a brief overland flight after landing. I'd heard that idea was rejected as being too dangerous, Kathy said. Their first proposal was, yes. Since then, they've been working on safer ways to do it. With only 3.5 years before Ares 4's scheduled launch, is there enough time to make and test modifications to the MDV? I can't answer that for sure. But remember, we made a lunar lander from scratch in 7 years. Excellent point, Kathy smiled. So what are his odds right now? No idea, Venkit said. But we're going to do everything we can to bring him home alive. Mindy glanced nervously around the conference room. She'd never felt so thoroughly outranked in her life. Dr. Venkat Kapoor, who was 4 levels of management above her, sat to her left. Next to him was Bruce Ng, the director of JPL. He'd flown all the way to Houston from Pasadena just for this meeting. Never one to let precious time go to waste, he typed furiously on his laptop. The dark bags under his eyes made Mindy wonder just how overworked he truly was. Mitch Henderson, the flight director for Ares 3, swiveled back and forth in his chair, a wireless earpiece in his ear.
Up and forward.
It fed him a real-time stream of all the comm chatter from Mission Control.
Elbows don't bend.
He wasn't on shift, but he was kept apprised at all times. Annie Montrose entered the conference room texting as she walked. Never taking her eyes off her phone, she deftly navigated around the edge of the room, avoiding people and chairs, and sat in her usual spot. Mindy felt a pang of envy as she watched the director of media relations. She was everything Mindy wanted to be. Confident, high-ranking, beautiful, and universally respected within NASA. How'd I do today? Venkit asked. Annie said, putting her phone away. You shouldn't say things like, bring him home alive. It reminds people he might die. They're going to forget that? You asked my opinion. Don't like it? Go fuck yourself. You're such a delicate flower, Annie. How'd you end up NASA's Director of Media Relations? Beats the fuck out of me, Annie said. Guys, Bruce said, I need to catch a flight back to LA in 3 hours. Is Teddy coming or what? Quit bitching, Bruce, Annie said. None of us want to be here. Mitch turned the volume down on his earpiece and faced Mindy. Who are you again? Mindy said. I'm Mindy Park. I work in SATCOM. You a director or something? No, I just work in SATCOM. I'm a nobody. Venkat looked to Mitch. I put her in charge of tracking Watney. She gets us the imagery. Huh, said Mitch. Not the director of SATCOM? Bob's got more to deal with than just Mars. Mindy's handling all the Martian satellites and keeps them pointed at Mark. Why Mindy? Mitch asked. She noticed he was alive in the first place. She gets a promotion because she was in the hot seat when the imagery came through? No, Venkat frowned. She gets a promotion because she figured out he was alive. Stop being a jerk, Mitch. You're making her feel bad. Mitch raised his eyebrows. Didn't think of that. Sorry, Mindy. Mindy looked at the table and managed to say, "Kay." Teddy entered the room. Sorry I'm late. He took his seat and pulled several folders from his briefcase. Stacking them neatly, he opened the top one and squared the pages within. Let's get started. Venkat, what's Watney's status? Alive and well, Venkat said. No change from my email earlier today. What about the RTG? Does the public know about that yet? Teddy asked. Annie leaned forward. So far so good, she said. The images are public, but we have no obligation to tell them our analysis. Nobody has figured it out yet. Why did he dig it up? Heat, I think, Venkat said. He wants to make the rover do long trips. It uses a lot of energy keeping warm. The RTG can heat up the interior without soaking battery power. It's a good idea, really. How dangerous is it? Teddy asked. As long as the container's intact, no danger at all. Even if it cracks open, he'll be okay if the pellets inside don't break. But if the pellets break too, he's a dead man. Let's hope that doesn't happen, Teddy said. JPL, how are the MDV plans coming along? We came up with a plan a long time ago, Bruce said. You rejected it. Bruce, Teddy cautioned. Bruce sighed. The MDV wasn't made for liftoff and lateral flight. Packing more fuel in doesn't help. We need a bigger engine and don't have time to invent one. So we need to lighten the MDV. We have an idea for that. The MDV can be its normal weight on primary descent. If we made the heat shield and outer hull detachable, they could ditch a lot of weight after landing at Ares 3 and have a lighter ship for the traverse to Ares 4. We're running the numbers now. Keep me posted, Teddy said. He turned to Mindy. Miss Park, welcome to the big leagues. Sir, Mindy said. She tried to ignore the lump in her throat. What's the biggest gap in coverage we have on Watney right now?
Adding in the hip rotation.
Mindy said. Once every 41 hours, we'll have a 17-minute gap. The orbits work out that way. You had an immediate answer, Teddy said. Good. I like it when people are organized. Thank you, sir. I want that gap down to 4 minutes, Teddy said. I'm giving you total authority over satellite trajectories and orbital adjustments. Make it happen. Yes, sir, Mindy said, with no idea how to do it. Teddy looked to Mitch. Mitch, your email said you had something urgent. Yeah, Mitch said. How long are we going to keep this from the Ares 3 crew? They all think Watney's dead. It's a huge drain on morale. Teddy looked to Venkat. Mitch, Venkat said. We discussed this. No, you discussed it, Mitch interrupted. They think they lost a crewmate. They're devastated. And when they find out they abandoned a crewmate, Venkat asked, will they feel better then? Mitch poked the table with his finger. They deserve to know. You don't think Commander Lewis can't handle the truth? It's a matter of morale, Venkat said. They can concentrate on getting home. I make that call, Mitch said. I'm the one who decides what's best for the crew, and I say we bring them up to speed. After a few moments of silence, all eyes turned to Teddy. He thought for a moment. Sorry, Mitch, I'm with Venkat on this one, he said. But as soon as we come up with a plan for rescue, we can tell Hermes. There needs to be some hope, or there's no point in telling them. Bullshit, Mitch grumbled, crossing his arms. Total bullshit. I know you're upset, Teddy said calmly. We'll make it right. Just as soon as we have some idea how to save Watney. Teddy let a few seconds of quiet pass before moving on. Okay, JPL's on the rescue option, he said with a nod toward Bruce. But it would be part of Ares 4. How does he stay alive till then? Venkat? Venkat opened a folder and glanced at the paperwork inside. I had every team check and double-check the longevity of their systems. We're pretty sure the hab can keep working for 4 years, especially with the human occupant fixing problems as they arise. But there's no way around the food issue. You'll start starving in a year. We have to send him supplies. Simple as that. What about an Ares 4 pre-supply? Teddy said. Landed at Ares 3 instead. That's what we're thinking, yeah, Venkat confirmed. Problem is, the original plan was to launch pre-supplies a year from now. They're not ready yet. It takes 8 months to get a probe to Mars in the best of times. The positions of Earth and Mars right now, it's not the best of times. We figure we can get there in 9 months. Presuming he's rationing his food, he's got enough to last 350 more days. That means we need to build a pre-supply in 3 months. JPL hasn't even started yet. That'll be tight, Bruce said. Making a pre-supply is a 6-month process. We're set up to pipeline a bunch of them at once, not to make one in a hurry. Sorry, Bruce, Teddy said. I know we're asking a lot, but you have to find a way. We'll find a way, Bruce said. But the OT alone will be a nightmare. Get started, I'll find you the money. There's also the booster, Venkat said. The only way to get a probe to Mars with the planets in their current positions is to spend a buttload of fuel. We only have one booster capable of doing that. The Delta 9 that's on the pad right now for the Eagle Eye 3 Saturn probe. We'll have to steal that. I talked to ULA and they just can't make another booster in time. The Eagle Eye 3 team will be pissed, but okay, said Teddy. We can delay their mission if JPL gets the payload done in time. Bruce rubbed his eyes. We'll do our best. He'll starve to death if you don't, Teddy said. Venkat sipped his coffee and frowned at his computer. A month ago, it would have been unthinkable to drink coffee at 9 p.m. Now it was necessary fuel. Shift schedules, fund allocations, project juggling, out-and-out looting of other projects. He'd never pulled so many stunts in his life. NASA's a large organization, he typed. It doesn't deal with sudden change well. The only reason we're getting away with it is the desperate circumstances. Everyone's pulling together to save Mark Watney with no interdepartmental squabbling. I can't tell you how rare that is. Even then, this is going to cost tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. The MDV modifications alone are an entire project that's being staffed up. Hopefully the public interest will make your job easier. We appreciate your continued support, Congressman, and hope you can sway the committee toward granting us the emergency funding we need. He was interrupted by a knock at his door. Looking up, he saw Mindy. She wore sweats and a t-shirt, her hair in a sloppy ponytail. Fashion tended to suffer when work hours ran long. Sorry to bother you, Mindy said. No bother, Venkat said. I could use a break. What's up? He's on the move, she said. Venkat slouched in his chair. Any chance it's a test drive? She shook her head.
All right. That's it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, please be sure to leave questions or comments and like and subscribe. If you have any requests for future videos, let me know. I'll try to work it in. Stay safe, everybody.